Referees, they're like the coolest people on the planet, right? Yeah, boo. That's what I was waiting for. Usually referees are not the liked people in this world. However, I'll admit to you, I used to be, I'm not really a giant sports fan. I used to be a Detroit fan. I still am a Detroit fan. I just don't have anything to root for. They just do so bad on so many fields. And so, nonetheless, referee is a term I never thought I would use for myself when considering being a dad. Yo, yeah, dads laugh. I mean, I laugh now at that very concept, but I just never considered it. When I was like, getting married, I was like, I'm going to be a dad someday. I didn't think that meant being a referee. I had no idea I would say the weirdest phrases to my kids I would ever say on the face of the planet. I had no idea that simultaneously I would say, hey, don't punch your sister. Hey, don't pull her hair. Hey, quit painting your brother with peanut butter. I had no idea I would be saying these types of phrases. So then that got me thinking, what words describe fatherhood besides just referee? And so I came up with a little list of different things here. And so like for example, you could say, Dad's a superhero because he's the one that comes in and gets rid of the boogeyman out of the closets. Right? Because that's what I do on a regular basis. Or Dad's a doctor because he's the one that the kids go to kiss all their boo-boos. At least my kids do me, nonetheless. And so a dad is the one that's the exterminator or the squasher of anything that crawls, except spiders. Those require backup. Those require mom. You know why? Because there are some spiders in this world that just want to see the world burn. That's all they care about, okay? You just know that if this happens, the building's going down, okay? That's just all there is to it, okay? And so there's all these different things. We could say that the dad is a chauffeur because they're the bringer of chariots and the navigator. Dads are Santa Claus, tooth fairies, investigators of lost blinkies and toys, teachers, chef. They're a piece of furniture to climb upon. A clown because they're the provider of the best jokes in the world. You know that to be true. Dad jokes rock. Okay, dad jokes rock. And my daughter hates them. She goes, Daddy, I'm thirsty. And of course I say, Hi, Thirsty, I'm Dad. He goes, Daddy, that's not, or Daddy, did you get a haircut? Nope, I got them all cut. Okay, those are the dad jokes. So Dad's the comedian, he's the clown, he does the pratfalls. It's funny when he gets hit in the head. I don't know what's up with that. I juggle because I used to be a clown. For real. And so I was doing a juggling thing. And my daughter's looking at this and she's like, Daddy, can you juggle these? And she's handing me things for me to juggle and I'm juggling those. She's like, oh, can you juggle these? And so I'm juggling these blocks, right? And I'm juggling them. And eventually I dropped one. And she thought that was the funniest thing in the world. So she picks it up and she tries to juggle. And so when she juggled, what she did was she threw it underhand like a softball pitch at my head. Okay? I'm like, oh, she thought that was funny. Daddy got hit in the head. So what does she do? She tries juggling other things in the house the same way. What can I throw at Daddy's head? Woohoo! Okay, and so it's just all the things that we can be. Now here's the other thing. Dads, whether they realize it or not, always teach whether or not the two greatest commandments are valuable. Love God and love people. Dads will teach that whether they believe in God or not. Because if they don't believe in God, they're not going to go to church and therefore teach that it's not worthwhile. If they think that all it cares about, all this matters is climbing that corporate ladder, and that's what matters, is sacrifice others to help self flourish, and they act like a casino, they teach their kids that loving other people is a lower priority than loving yourself. And so dads are the demonstrator of the two greatest commandments, on whether or not they are valuable, on whether or not they are worth following. Okay, so we're going to look at some of these, not just these two, but we're going to continue on with what Jesus is dealing with as we're going throughout the whole book of Matthew, starting at verse 1 in chapter 1, been plowing our way through. Do you realize it's chapter 22? We're like almost done. We're at the 75% mark here. It's been a year and a half. Come on. It's been a long time in this series. So check this out. So starting in chapter 22, verse 34, here's what's going on. So hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him, Jesus, with this question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And there were, by the way, in just the first 5 books of the Bible, Matthew to Deuteronomy, there are 614 commands. Okay, and they're like, Jesus, which one's number 1? Which is a really, fun question to ask. Okay, so Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And before they could interject, Jesus continued, and the second is like it. Because the Pharisees were like, which is more important, loving God or loving people? And they're always fighting about that because, why actually love people when you can fight about it? That's what they're all about, all right? And so Jesus just quickly goes, and the second is like it. And they're like, what? And he says, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law of the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Love God, love people. That's what all the laws are about. 614 commands in the first 5 books. All of them fall into one or two of the 2 categories of loving God or loving people and how that looks and how that's to be expressed. Okay, so that's Jesus' reply to the Pharisees. Now, this gets weird because first, that whole thing, how to love God as yourself. Because people point out this sounds like a contradiction in the Bible. Because did you know that it is a sin to love yourself? This is weird, right? Check this out. So Timothy wrote in 2 Timothy chapter 3, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days, sinful times, dark times, disturbing times, terrible times. Different translations use different words there. And so there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be what? Lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive. Since when did you ever think that lovers of yourself or loving yourself would be in the same list as something like abusive? That seems really odd, doesn't it? Because the great theologian and the almighty Queen Oprah, please note my sarcasm there, says that you cannot love others unless you first love yourself. That's what she says. That's her mantra. That's her big slogan. But yet Timothy says, bad place to start. Bad place to start. And so it's weird that Timothy says, do not love yourself. People will be lovers of themselves. That's a sign of bad times. And yet Jesus says, love others like your neighbor as you love. That's that golden rule, right? That's that golden rule we hear about. Love others as yourself. Now, here's the difference. Here's what's going on here. Because, like I said, people think this is a contradiction. And they go, what's going on? See, the Bible can't be trusted. Love others like you love yourself, but don't love yourself. So I guess that means don't love others. And they take it to really, really weird places. So here's what's going on. First off, every human being on the face of the planet loves themselves, even the suicidal ones who hate themselves, even the ones that are depressed with low self-esteem. They love themselves. Okay, they really, really do. Even though you might say, well, they said, I hate myself, and they will swear up and down, I hate myself. Yeah, they say that, but since when can you trust every word somebody says? They really do love themselves because if they're in pain, they try to stop it. If they're cold, they try to get warm. If they're hungry, they try to eat. And so people do love themselves. They may not appreciate their circumstances. They might not appreciate different things about themselves, but they ultimately do try to the best of their ability to help themselves flourish. That's what people do. Now, they might get depressed when that fails, but they are still attempting to do that. That's Jesus' attitude in the book of Matthew. As you try to help yourself flourish, help other people flourish. As you try to keep warm, help other people keep warm. As you try to be fed, help other people be fed. So as you take care of yourself, as you are committed to yourself, because the word love in the Bible is not an emotion. We don't have the I love you in an emotional sense. It's not, love doesn't mean I'm happy with you. Love doesn't mean I'm pleased with you. Think of John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his son. It's not that God was happy with the world, because he wasn't. The world was sinful, the world was dark, the world was separated from him, and it wasn't because he was pleased about that he gave his son. It's because he was committed to the world flourishing that he gave his son, that there might be redemption, restoration, and healing and salvation. Okay, so that's how love is in the Bible. It is a commitment to a relationship. It is not a happy-go-lucky feeling. Okay, so Jesus says, love others as you love yourself. Be committed to other people's thriving as you are to your own. And as Timothy talks about how this is a bad thing to be all lovers of yourself, he's talking about this, where people will be only focused on their own flourishing. They will stop being focused on other people's flourishing. That's why they become abusive. That's why they become all these other things, because all they care about is their own flourishing. So that's how the two work together. Okay, so what we find out here then is that if you're going to be a great dad, one of the things you're going to have to learn to do is follow the 2 commandments. Love God and love people. Wise dads do that. Wise moms do that. Wise single people do that. Wise infertile people who will never be parents do that. Okay, so I hope you hear that just because this is Father's Day that it neglects half the people here. It does not. Everybody is under the rule of this one because we all should follow the 2 commandments. Love God, love people. Real simple, real simple. Now, we're not going to belabor on this point because here's the other things that are going on in this passage. It's really a weird and interesting passage, okay? Because wise dads, as well as wise moms and wise single people, try their best to learn who God, who Jesus is. Okay, so check this out. So it continues on. While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, this is great, for years now, like 2 years, the Pharisees have been attacking Jesus. Jesus, what do you think about this? Jesus, what do you think about that? How many angels dance on the head of a pin? And they're just going off on Jesus. And Jesus is dealing with their tricks and their traps and everything that's going on. And so now the tables turn. Jesus decides to have the boxing gloves on, and rather than simply deflecting, he labels one out there. He logs out a shot and sees what happens, not to trick them like they've been doing, not to trap them like they've been doing, but instead to try to convict them, to show them a hole in their thinking so that they might see who Jesus really is. So Jesus asked them, what do you think about the Messiah? Who's his daddy? Okay, that's his question. Whose son is he? Okay, whose son is he? The son of David, they replied. And Jesus said, really? I know, it's not there, but it's in the Greek. Jesus goes, really? Yeah, I think there's extra E's there. It's a long, drawn-out letter. Really? How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, because they knew that the Spirit anointed David to speak the truth of God, and what he wrote was Scripture. Despite his failings, despite his sin, the Holy Spirit took a crooked stick and drew a straight line. That's what happened. Okay, so David wrote some great stuff that are what we know of as the Bible, the Old Testament. So how then has David, speaking by the Spirit, call the Messiah Lord? For he said, and Jesus quotes, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If David calls him Lord, how can he be his son? Because after all, what parent calls their kid God? Any parent here want to do that? Usually, if they use their kid's name and the word God in any way, it's usually taking the name of God in vain in some way. That's usually how the two are in the same sentence, okay? And so it's really kind of, parents don't do that. In fact, they don't say, my kid's God. They tend to say, my kid's demon-possessed. That's usually how they explain the behaviors of their children, okay? So it's really bizarre. So that how, if he's the Lord, can he be David's son? No one could say a word in reply. You see, people usually, if they recognize they're wrong, if they're mature, they'll admit it. They'll say, wow, I never thought of it like that. I might be wrong. And they'll change their point of view. not these religious leaders. Because after all, religious people, not godly people, tend to be all about their rules and their expectations and tend to be all about their procedures and rituals. And if something challenges it, they don't want to ever think that maybe the change is good. Instead, they just go humph and they walk away. Okay, and they want nothing to do with it. And so that's what happens. No one could say a word of reply. So that day on, no one dared to ask Jesus any more questions. And Jesus is like, man, should have said this sooner. Peace and quiet at last. And it could be Jesus just kind of sat on this question until he was up to here. Right? Parents do that, right? They wait till they're up to here, and then finally they tell the kids, go to your room, go outside and play in traffic. Why? Because I said so. It just give me a moment. Well, too many parents related with that way too quick. So, here's what's going on. Wise dads will learn who Jesus is. Now, Jesus is pointing out two natures of the Messiah, who Jesus is. Two natures of himself. And I want you to check this out. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. We're going to enjoy this because the first question, whose son is the Messiah? The word son reveals something very interesting. That the Messiah, God, will be human. Okay, that God is going to take on humanity, that there's going to be a human nature about him. And I'll be honest with you, people struggle with the humanity of Jesus, and it's divided by age. Now, I was warned not to make any old jokes. I'm going to make one. No, I'm going to send you to the line. Here we go. You ready? So, those that are of the baby boomer generation, okay, not those that were alive when Edison was born. Baby boomers and before. Those generations will struggle here more than they will with Jesus' divinity. They will struggle here more. And so now people, the younger, the Generation Xers, the millennials, they will struggle with the divinity more and be fine with this. So when I go through this here in just a moment, people like my age are going to be like, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, that's funny. And then the other people are going to be like, you should not say that in church. What is wrong with you? That does not belong. You talked about Jesus. Oh, that's sacrilegious. So we're going to have some offended people here today. And if you are offended and you want to complain, our deacon Scott Wheatley's email address is... don't send them to mine. But Jesus was human. Not like 50% human. Not played the role of a human. He was 100% a human being. And this is going to be weird. So check this out. Usually, in order to prove my point, let's ask a weird question. What does Jesus look like? Haven't you ever wondered that? Haven't you ever wondered, what did Jesus look like? In fact, usually when we think of Jesus, a particular image comes to mind. Right? Right? Something like this comes to mind. And if we see this, we know this is a picture of whom? Yeah, you don't say George Clooney. Because you know who this is. Why does this make us think of Jesus? Because he has a beard. Well, so does Duck Dynasty. So did ZZ Top. And we don't think Jesus about them, do we? No, because Jesus also has no long hair. Well, so did other people. But we say, well, look, yeah, that's Jesus. Because this, by the way, is the most famous painting representing Jesus that exists in the world. It was painted, by the way, in the 1930s. So it's a relatively new picture, historically speaking. And here's how the painter brought this picture to be. He was instructed how to paint Jesus by the people that hired him. And here was their instructions. I'm not making this up. This is awesome. They said, paint the face of a woman and give it a beard and long hair. So if you look at it, remove the beard and long hair, do you begin to see that we have metrosexual Jesus here? Right, that's kind of what we got going on, right? We got somebody from The Greatest Showman singing. That's what we got. We don't got actually Jesus here. Thank you, the three people that got that reference. Everyone else is like, greatest show. I'm like, yeah, go to Redbox. Okay, so that's what we got. We got transsexual Jesus here. That's this picture. That's what's going on, okay? That's not Jesus at all. But yet still, it pervades our mind. Because if we were to go to the costume store, especially along Halloween, and we were to buy ourselves a Jesus costume, right? This is what it looks. This is, by the way, real picture. This is a Jesus costume from Party City during Halloween time. And so this is legit, okay? This is a legit thing. This is a Jesus costume. What makes it a Jesus costume? Really long beard, really long hair, and a crown of thorns, because that makes it Jesus, okay? So, because that's what our mind says. But did you know that most of Jesus' ministry, he didn't have long hair? People thought later in time, thought he had long hair because he was from Nazareth. That meant that he must have taken the Nazarite vow, which meant don't ever cut your hair. But he did not take the Nazarite vow because it also said do not drink fruit of the vine, do not drink wine, which he did, if nothing else, at the Last Supper. So therefore, he did not take the Nazarite vow. Therefore, he could very well cut his hair and likely did. And he didn't have a beard through most of his ministry. The beard and the paintings were added about the Byzantine period onward because the Byzantines said, you know, all our paintings of Jesus is without a beard. Seriously, they were. Like, he was without a beard. So beard means power. Beard means authority. Okay? I don't know what beards mean anymore. I guess now it means chick. And so it's like the on-in thing now. All these people are going beard, just like the hot new thing. You know, I did it first. I've had this for years before it became in style again. So everyone's trying to look like me, I guess. But Jesus didn't have a beard because it was added later. Now, he grew a beard at some point in his ministry because the Bible talks about them pulling out pieces of his beard when he's being crucified. So around like the last several months of his ministry, it is believed that as he ended this discussion with the Pharisees, since he no longer asked them questions, it is believed that at this point he stopped shaving. Because before he would shave so as not to be confused with the religious leaders because they believed in growing out beards to show the religious authority. And he is very much not wanting to be confused with them. Okay, and so here, let's just take a guess now, okay? So let's take a guess what it would look like if we started removing all the things that were added to the artwork. You ready? You ready? Because Jesus, likely for most of his ministry, didn't have a beard and also didn't have long hair like that. And so maybe this is what Jesus looked like. No, Jerry Seinfeld is not Jesus. I'm not saying that. Don't go there with me, okay? But here's the thing. I actually have real pictures of paintings of Jesus without beards. Like this one is a mosaic. Now, here's a picture of Jesus without a beard. I can prove that it's Jesus and not somebody else because first, a halo with the cross behind it. And if you looked in his right hand there, right in the palm, what do you see? Yeah, a nail scar. Okay, so this is how they depicted Jesus back. And by the way, just for fun, just because this is creepy, do you see similarities here? I'm just saying. It's just a little creepy. Okay, so who knows? Maybe there's a family connection with one of Jesus' brothers or distant cousins. Who knows? But it's just kind of weird. I ran across this one as well of Jesus. This is where the woman who is bleeding goes to Jesus and touches his cloak by his feet. And he says, oh, who just touched me? And she immediately stopped bleeding. Okay, and here's Jesus and looking all, by the way, without a beard and definitely not long hair at all. And then there's also this one. I call this Billy Ray Jesus. Because yeah, he's got that whole mullet thing going on. So if Jesus looked like this, he invented the mullet with the party in the front and party in the back and all the business going on, right? And so that's what's going on. And so, but here's Jesus again, without a beard. Okay, there are so many paintings. In fact, historically, there's actually more paintings of Jesus without a beard and that traditional long hair than there are with. It's just we know more of the other ones because they are circulated more within society because mostly of that 1930s painting that made it all famous. And then that's what we get in our movies, and on it goes. Okay, and so what did Jesus look like? Well, I don't know. I really don't know. We don't have an authentic photograph of Jesus. I'm glad we don't, because then people would make a God out of the picture. Okay, that's what people would do because we're all about the relics and worshiping the relics and putting them on display and ignoring the God who made them. Ignoring the God who the relics sometimes point to. So we tend to be all about that. We tend to be all about saying, hey, let's go to the ark because the ark is cool. And we're all about the ark and we miss the God who said to build it. And we can sometimes get distracted from things. And so Jesus was human. Okay, he was human. In fact, on the back of your notes, I gave you like an appendix there, that he was born of a woman. That's an awfully human thing to do. He grew as any human did and had to learn, just like any other human had to do. Here's a list of things that's on your note as well in the appendix A, that says that he was hungry, he had fatigue, he got tired, he experienced agony, he needed to pray, he learned, he was under human authority, both as a child and as an adult. He was thirsty, he was tempted, he suffered. Okay, there were things that Jesus did. It was human things to do. Okay, very, very human things to do because Jesus was human. He wasn't pretending to be thirsty. He really was thirsty. He wasn't pretending to be tired and sleeping. He really was tired and sleepy. And there's one that's not on the list I'd like to add for you, that Jesus was funny. Jesus was funny. And check this out. Check this, just for real. You ready for this? Ready for this? Who did Jesus hang out with the most? His 12 disciples. What was the average and the majority occupation of the disciples? Fishermen. Okay? Now I'm telling you, you cannot hang out with fishermen without cracking a joke. You can't do it. You cannot hang out with fishermen without playing a game of pull my finger. Okay? And so would Jesus play pull my finger? What do you think? Who wants to vote? Yes, Jesus would play pull my finger. Who would say that? Jesus would play pull my finger. Who's willing to raise their hand on that? Anybody? Who would say, no, that's unholy. Jesus would not play pull my finger. Jesus did not pass gas. He did not have flatulence. Come on, Jesus was hungry. He was thirsty. He ate. He drank. Guess what that means? He had bowel movements. He urinated and had gas. Okay, and I know people don't want to talk about that because they struggle with his humanity and they don't realize that he was human. That means he farted. That's what happened. Jesus blew wind. Jesus cut the cheese. And just because he's God in the flesh doesn't mean it smelled like strawberries. We can't say he has some type of holy gas brewing around in there. And people are like, that's sacrilegious. Don't talk about Jesus like that. Well, am I wrong? Did Jesus never pass gas? Did he never go numbers 1 and 2? Of course he did. That's exactly my point. Okay, Jesus was human. And so he passed gas because he is human. And like I said, people my generation can embrace that. They can. They can embrace that. They can say, yeah, that's funny. You're right. He would have urinated. You're right. He did pass gas. You're right. Because he was human. What human here doesn't pass gas? I know many women try to hide it, and that's why they get cranky. Because they don't let it out. And they're grumpy. Okay? And so Jesus let her rip. And that's fine. That's okay. Because Jesus was what? Human. And those are human. Those are not sinful things to do. It is not sin to cut the cheese. It is not. It's not like some kid sits at your dining room table, leans over, you hear a big old thundering noise like a herd of turtles, and you say, go see the pastor. You need to repent. No, you need to chillax because, oh my goodness. Okay, so Jesus was human. Hear that. Okay, that's why I told our secretary, I said, by the way, I believe that Jesus' gas is essential to understanding Jesus. And she said, no, that's not true. And I'm like, yeah, it is true. She's like, no, it's not. I'm like, yes, it is, because it points to his humanness. It points to his humanness. But Jesus was not just human. Because Jesus wasn't just talking about whose son is he. David called Jesus what? Lord. So therefore, the second and third questions asked by Jesus points to, why did David call him Lord? And that question points to Jesus' divinity, that he was 100% God. 100% God. He was not 50% God, 50% human. Because that means there were part of him that was not God and part of him that was not human. He's 100%, both at the same time. That's what's going on. He is completely 100% human, completely 100% God. And our world struggles today with this. 1960s, 1970s, 1950s, 40s, 30s, all the way back, struggled with his humanity. Today we struggle with his divinity. We say he was just a man. He was just a good teacher, just a good prophet. But we don't really grasp the divinity, God part of this God-man. Okay, so we struggle with his divinity. In fact, so many people mess this up. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Jesus was a God, not the God. Mormons and Muslims believe that Jesus was just a prophet or a good teacher. Judaism definitely don't view him as God. And all these groups I mentioned, they worship a God that's not triune, that Jesus is not part of it. Therefore, they all worship a false God. People say, well, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, they all worship the same God. No, we don't. Because the Muslims and the Jews worship a God that's not triune. They worship a God who Jesus is not part of the equation. So we don't worship the same God at all. And so Jesus is God, plain and simple. In fact, our nation has struggled with this for so long. Check this out, that in our Capitol building, okay, in our Capitol building of the United States of America is in the dome this painting. This painting, I'll zoom it in here for you, is called The Apotheosis of George Washington. Okay, the Apotheosis of Washington. And this painting teaches that when Washington died, he ascended and became a god. And he is here with the rainbow at his feet. He has purple royal linens on, surrounded by 3 goddesses and 13 gods, and is declared a god. That's what that painting is about. It's called the Apotheosis of Washington, the divinity created of Washington. In fact, there are Shinto shrines throughout our country that are very much, this is their sermon, that they are right now, or in a few hours, like the one in Hawaii, they're different time zone than us, but they are going to be waking up this morning and having a worship service where they are all about worshiping and praising to George Washington as God. Okay, so our nation has struggled with divinity for a long time. We have struggled with it and struggled with it. That Jesus is God. He is not just a good teacher. He is Lord. Okay, that's who Jesus is. He is Lord. And one of the best ways to look at this, I gave you on your Appendix B, which is this is a great Bible study. Here's how you approach Jesus' divinity to people, in case you ever wondered. Here's a little bit of education for you. Ready for some academia? No? I'm getting it anyway. On the left is a column that shows the attributes of God the Father in the Old Testament that are undisputed between the Jews and Christians and anyone that accepts the Old Testament. These are definite traits of God the Father, unique to God the Father only. On the right is Jesus having the same qualities and traits and attributes. Okay, so if God has attributes A and only God has it, example, only God controls the weather. Only God has the ability to control the weather. If he wants it to stop, it will stop. Okay, because God has that authority and power. Does Jesus have that ability? Yes, because he spoke to the storm and it quit and it freaked out the disciples. Okay, so it's that type of a thing. Only God can do this, yet Jesus did it. Therefore, if only God can do A and Jesus did A, then Jesus is God. That's how it works. And I gave you a good long list of this here. Just some. It's just a beginning. It's not an exhaustive list at all. Okay, so explore that. Enjoy that. See that as God is declared as having existed before time, so is Jesus. See that as God forgives sins, so does Jesus. See that as God is the righteous judge, so is Jesus. And on it goes. Okay, there's so many things there. And so here's the thing, wise dads, they will obey and follow the 2 greatest commands, love God, love people, but they won't stop there because they will learn who Jesus is as God. They will learn and embrace his humanity, and they will learn and they will embrace his divinity. And here's where the struggle lies. The baby boomer generation, I'm just being honest here, on average, the baby boomer generation struggles with Jesus' divinity in this, or Jesus' humanity in this way. Here's how it looks. They believe Jesus is playing like Superman, and that the humanity is something he just acted out. And like Superman, Superman had his alter ego. What was he? Clark Kent. Now, if someone went up to Clark Kent and shot him with a bullet, would it hurt him? No, why not? Because he's Superman. Clark Kent is a costume. And many people view Jesus that way when it comes to his humanity. They view it that as God pretending to be human. That's why they struggle with gas. That's why they struggle with hunger. That's why they struggle with that's why they struggle with why Jesus was tempted. And they don't fully wrap their mind around it. They say, well, he really wasn't, because if he would have given in, he wouldn't have been God, so there's no way he could have given in. But they're missing the point. He was really seriously tempted because he was human. It was not just some jacket with a button-up shirt and glasses to cover up his divinity. He was a human being. Otherwise, the sacrifice wouldn't have been a proper exchange. Otherwise, his death on the cross wouldn't have been a human death, which it needed to be. Because the death is for humans to die like that. It's our punishment. He needed to be on our behalf. He needed to be a human sacrifice. Had to be the God-man. And because of his divinity is why he rose again from the dead. It was a human thing to die. It was a God thing to rise again by your own power. Okay, so this is where we struggle with this. And it's a real struggle, and we need to learn, who is Jesus? Why does he matter? Because if we don't figure this out, we won't be able to do this, pointing others to Jesus, which is what a father needs to do, which is what a mom needs to do. It breaks my heart when I see parents send kids to church and the parents stay home. Because then the parents are trying to tell their kids church matters, but not for adults. And then the parents wonder why their kids don't go to church when they go to college. Because the parents weren't there. This is why, ladies, if you're single and you're wanting to date, make sure that man's a godly man before you marry. Otherwise, the message and value sent to your kids is going to be contradictory between you and him. And men, before you marry, make sure that that woman's a godly woman before you marry. Otherwise, that message is going to be a contradictory message to your kids between you and her. It is essential that we know that Jesus matters today. It is not about some benefit that we're going to get tomorrow or sometime down the road when we die. It's not about fire insurance that maybe we'll need at some point, but right now it's just something that sits on the table or inside of a box or a fire safe. It's not like that. Jesus makes a difference now. He has expectations now. Following him now means something. It means something. That we live a life that obeys him. That we live a life that follows him. That we live a life that's being redeemed by him. That means something. It has this essential value to us as human beings. We got to have that. We got to show that. But instead, man, it's like we struggle with this. It's almost like we just say, life just gets too busy. Life just gets in the way. Life just gets, I got to work, I got my schedule, I got whatever, and I just don't have time for all that God stuff. And here's just the reality. If something is really, truly valuable to you, you find time for it. You make room for it. Because the same people that tell me they don't have enough money or they don't have enough time for church are the same people that still make it to the movie theaters. And they say, well, churches is too far away. I just don't like driving it. But they drive a half hour to a movie theater, or they drive an hour to the mall, or they go to Brown County. have no problem to getting there. But, 15 minutes up the road to church, that's just too much. I just don't got time. But yet, vacation. Somehow you say no to work for that. Somehow you find time for all these things, but God never gets a spot. So who is Jesus to you, really? Is he significant in your life for real? I'm not talking playing church like kids play house, where we show up and we try to act all one way and put on the face, and we have this great little reputation thing going on, make sure no one's talking bad about us, and if we don't go, the pastor's going to call, and we don't want that. That's like going to the principal's office. Is church really, truly worthwhile to you? Is gathering with other believers, seeing that you're not alone in the struggles of this world, seeing that you're not alone in the limitations of resources, seeing that you're not alone in the differences and changes that are happening, does that mean anything to you? And you might say, well, I don't get anything out of it, but you can give something to it. Because your presence encourages other people. Your presence lets other people know they're not alone. But does that even matter? Have we all become lovers of self? Or are we really following those two commands? Love God, love people. So which is it for you? Who is Jesus to you? A word of prayer.